your mouse settings in this case. Now I'm going to be going over all of these and why I have it set to this. Now I want to be very clear on this. You do not want to be copying my settings. And the reason I say this is everybody's different. Everybody has a different mouse, everybody has a different mouse pad, and even if you had the exact same mouse and mouse pad and setup that I had, my options and my sensitivities might not work for you. So this whole video is just an informational video to help you understand how to better tweak your sensitivity and your options to help you play better and also be able to flick shoot in Counter-Strike Go. So the first thing we're going to be looking at is two very important aspects. It's raw input and mouse acceleration. Now you're going to probably be wondering why I have mouse acceleration on. But first thing I want to mention what raw input is. When you have raw input on, it's basically pulling all the information directly from the mouse, ignoring any information in the background from Windows or your mouse drivers. Essentially, like if you have the Rocat Cone XDD like I do, the options that you have there, it's not going to be pulling from that. It's going to be pulling it directly from your mouse and ignoring any Windows settings in the background. So if you have it off, that's going to be taking in the information from Windows. One of the things you want to be looking for when you have raw mouse input at 0, you're going to want to first go to your pointer options and turn off enhanced pointer precision. This is Windows mouse acceleration. You do not want Windows mouse acceleration. If you also notice, I have it 1 bar down. Now you can have this to anything you like. Personally, what I noticed is when I turned off enhanced pointer precision, my mouse moved a lot quicker. So I wanted it to be a little slower and moved it down, and it felt perfect for me. Again, this is all preference and you guys can decide what works for you. In general, the theory is you want to have it at the 6 out of 11 because that is the point where it'll be pretty much a 1-to-1 ratio. If you have it anything lower, it's actually a fraction of that, and it gets a little bit complicated here. But the point is, generally you want to have it at 611. I just like being at 511. Now the other thing is, if you have a good mouse, being like the Rocat Cone XCD or any of those nice mice like a Logitech or whatnot, you're going to have these awesome settings with your mouse drivers. Now keep in mind, if you have mouse raw input at 1, you will not be pulling from your Windows information. It's going to be pulling directly from your mouse. Essentially saying it's going to ignore everything in the background and only pull directly from your mouse and give you the sensitivity from your mouse. So that's something you want to think about. But if you have a mouse that's actually really good and has all these extra driver features and whatnot, you're going to want to have it to 0. I personally like it at 0. Again, it's preference, so if you want to have it at 1, that's perfectly fine, and I can go on into the commentary explaining how you can still be able to flick shoot even having it at 1 and how to perfect your aim even with a raw mouse input at 1. But if you have it at 0, some of the cool things you can do is use these other features that come with your mouse. So one of the things with the Rocat Cone XCD is they have this advanced control option. Now, one of the things you want to do right away is tracking control. Now what this does is it will recalibrate your mouse, and as you can see it says don't move your mouse when you do this, but what it does is it will recalibrate your mouse to reading the mouse pad a lot better. So it's going to be readjusting the sensors and lasers on the mouse in order to be able to track your mouse pad better to give you better pinpoint precision, and it does a lot for me. I personally love it like this. There's also other features where you can do advanced sensitivity settings, you can do your button assignments, and of course you can have these sensitivity settings that you can change, including your DPI, and one of the most important things is your polling rate. You want to have this as high as possible. Some people like it at 500, I personally like it at 1000. Now what this does is it's the refresh rate of the mouse, how fast it's quickly getting the information from your mouse to the computer and back. Having it at 1000 is the quickest possible. Now I know different mice have different settings, so you probably will not have these settings. Personally, I love the Rocat Cone XCD because of all these settings and how awesome a mouse it is. But if you are going to be using any other mice, I'm sure there's different settings here, but if you don't have these type of settings, I'd recommend having your raw mouse input at 1. But if you want to just fiddle with the regular Windows sensitivity options, just turn off enhanced pointer precision. It's the same thing here where it says enable mouse acceleration. If you turn this on, it would be basically turning on enhanced pointer precision. You want to have these off because the mouse accel from Windows has a very bad polling rate. You cannot really determine how much you need to move your mouse to be able to do your proper flick. Now, this is what it would look like having your enhanced pointer precision off without Windows Excel. If I were to move my mouse slightly like this, here I'll double zoom for you guys to see a better view. If I were to move slightly like this, I can easily aim there and it wouldn't move. But if I were to move quicker to further target, it goes pretty much as accurate as I can possibly do it. I can flick my mouse left and right as much as I want, and it's not going to go crazy. And I'm really moving my mouse on my mouse pad here. Now, let me turn on the enhanced pointer precision so you guys can see what happens when Windows acceleration is put in there, and that's actually very bad because it's hard for you to kind of coordinate the speed that you need to move your mouse in regards to being able to flick properly. So this is what it looks like with enhanced pointer precision on, which is Windows Mouse Excel. If you move quick, you can notice that the mouse starts flying more to the side. It just slides away. Like you can notice it here, it just wants to keep moving, and I'm not able to really figure out where to control it properly. It just flies across. Now, that's something you want to have off. Now, jumping back in here, you'll notice that I have mouse acceleration on, and I have it at 1.05, and there's a reason for that, and I'm going to be getting into that later on into the video, and this generally has to do with the AWP flick shooting. But first thing we're going to be looking at is why do I have my mouse sensitivity at 1.8 and zoom sensitivity of 0.66? Why I chose these random obscure numbers as the numbers I'm going to be using for AWPing or even just shooting in general. And I also want to mention that if you have raw mouse input on, these functions will still work for you. You can even have mouse Excel on or off. Whatever works for you is perfect. I'm just going to be explaining to you how to tweak it to better fit your needs and to be a better sniper and also a better aimer in Counter-Strike. Now, in general, you do not want to have a sensitivity that's too fast. Anything like higher than 3 I would consider as too fast. If you look at the sensitivities of any of the pro players out there, they're generally at 3 or less than that. So what mine is 1.8, and I'm going to be explaining why it is 1.8, but the first thing you want to be considering to yourself is your sensitivity perfect? Are you comfortable with it? Do you think that it can be improved upon, or do you think your sensitivity is just right for you? Even if you have raw input at 1 or 0, whatever you have it at, does the sensitivity feel right? So if first thing to figure out is your sensitivity is right is can you lock onto a target and maintain your aim at that target without having too much difficulty aiming at that target no matter where you move. If you can do that, you generally have it right. If that doesn't feel too comfortable, I'd recommend turning it up. If it feels like it's too slow, I'd recommend turning it up by about 0.1. So what you do is you open up your console, type in sensitivity, and it would bring it up. You can just press your up arrow and it would bring it up. And if you feel it's too slow, increase it by 0.1. So in my case, it would be increasing it to 1.9. But in other cases, it could be any sensitivity that you want to increase by 0.1. That kind of sounded confusing, but the point is increase it by 0.1. The other thing is, if it feels too fast, decrease it by 0.1. And you're going to be keeping on doing that until it feels comfortable for you. So now with your sensitivity changed, you have to consider your recoil to your AK or any gun in the matter. So what you want to do is practice controlling your recoil. Feel comfortable with controlling that recoil. Any tweak you do is going to have an effect on everything in the game for you. So if you tweak it, keep in mind you have to readjust yourself to understanding the recoil of weapons. So first thing you're going to want to look at is now that you've tweaked it up or down, you're going to want to have to consider controlling your AK recoil. So first thing you're going to do is just maintain at least 5 bullets into the same dot. So it would look something like this. That's to start it off, and then you eventually get it to this. Can you maintain it? After a couple of shots, you'll figure out that that's how much you need to control your recoil to maintain your 5-shot burst into the same spot. Once you can do that, you pretty much understand your recoil so that you can do a 2-shot burst easily. Now after you've decided that you've got a good sensitivity where you can lock onto a target really well, you've tweaked it to the way you like it, you're able to control the recoil and maintain the headshots with it. Now the next thing to do is determine, am I able to hit long range target? So I'm going to be going to long A to show you what I mean by that. So I want you guys to pay close attention to the mouse, and I'm going to be zooming in on the mouse as well to show you this. But if you notice, at long range, when I try to move my mouse as slowly as possible, you can notice that my mouse is actually jumping. Now, keep in mind, I've already increased my sensitivity to 3 to show you that a fast sensitivity is not that great for long range. It moves too much. Keeping in mind, an enemy is actually very small in the distance, and they would be very hard to hit if your mouse is jumping a lot like this. And this is me actually moving my mouse as slow as I possibly can, and it is still jumping. So let's go to my sensitivity, which is sensitivity of 1.8. Now keep in mind, I want to reiterate this. This is something that works for me. this might not be something that works for you. So you want to tweak it to your perfection. Do not use my settings, use settings that work for you using the tweaking method that I'm explaining. Now notice with the sensitivity of 1.8, the mouse is really smooth when I move my mouse left and right. It's not jumping, this is as slow as I possibly move my mouse, and it is holding that aim I can easily lock on with more precision on the enemy. Now, what do you do if, say, you've gone through the process of first perfecting your aim, locking onto a target, then being able to control it with the recoil, tweaking it to the way you feel is right, but now you've noticed that at long range it's either too fast, and in that case what you do, you're going to have to turn it down by 0.1 again. As I mentioned, in case of my sensitivity, which was 1.8, you would turn it down to 1.7. But in your case, you would turn it down by 0.1 to whatever feels perfect for you. And then test it again. Does this feel smooth now that I can be able to lock onto a target? Do I feel comfortable maintaining my aim? And can I control the recoil? It's just a step-by-step process you're going to have to repeat until you find a sensitivity you are very comfortable with. You're able to lock onto targets and be able to maintain aim, pre-aiming at certain areas. If you notice, like what I mean by pre-aim is I'll aim here, see there, and then pre-aim here. It's a smooth sensitivity I'm very comfortable with. It's something you're going to want to be tweaking to find something that's comfortable for you. Maintain your lock onto a target and not lose that lock. So now we're going to be looking at something slightly different, and this is more towards the AWP sniping, and that's the zoom sensitivity of the sniping rifle. So what you want to go to is in your console command, type zoom, and it right away comes up. It's the second one down. If you're using the joystick, use the joystick option, but in this case we're all keyboard and mouse players here, so use the option for the mouse, and you're going to want to, it's initially by default it's set to 1. What I like to do is, from playing Battlefield and other games, I've noticed that when you scope in with a weapon, it's about 75% slower than your actual sensitivity. Now this zoom sensitivity ratio, it is a ratio which is essentially a percentage of the speed of your current mouse speed. So in this case, if my mouse sensitivity is 1.8, I have a zoom sensitivity ratio of 0.66. That's actually 66% the speed of my 1.8 mouse sensitivity. So what you want to do is, first of all, put your mouse sensitivity or zoom mouse sensitivity to 0.6 or 0.7. Those are the two options I like, which is essentially 60% or 70%. You want to play around with it. Now you start off with 0.6 or 0.7, whichever one, it doesn't matter. So once you've set that, you're going to want to get the AWP, and this again is when I go to your mouse options and keyboard and mouse. We're going to be ignoring why I have mouse acceleration on and why I have the acceleration amount of 1.05. I'm going to be explaining that at the end. Right now we're just looking at the zoom sensitivity. So even if you had raw input on as 1 or on, and the raw input is in the console command would be m_raw input. It's 0 for me, 1 would be on, 0 would be off. So essentially, even if you had it on 1, this is how you're going to be tweaking it. Start off with the zoom sensitivity ratio at 60% or 70%, which is 0.6 or 0.7. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to scope in on a target and try flick shooting at them. The only way to really perfect this is to do it in deathmatch. Deathmatch is the best way to determine your AWP. That is how I was able to determine how I was able to snipe with it, and I was also, you'll notice, I like to do a lot of 360s when I'm sniping. There's a reason for this. When I do a 360, it helps me understand my mouse sensitivity and also my zoom sensitivity for flicking. It's building my muscle memory and building the idea that I know how my mouse is moving in order to be able to better flick and aim at the enemy. Now, if you find at any point that when you flick at the enemy and you're flicking and you feel like it's a little bit too far from the enemy, it's not flicking at them, you want to change the sensitivity up by 0.02. So looking at the game here, what you want to do is increase your sensitivity by zoom. You just press up, it gets you the ratio for the mouse, and change it by 0.0. So essentially, assume you started at 60%, which is 0.6. You want to increase it by 0.02. This is if you feel like when you flick at the enemy and it's farther away from them than getting onto them, it's not getting close to them. you want to increase it by 0.02. So in this case, from 0.6, you increase it by 0.62. And then you want to try that. Play deathmatch. Play around with it. It takes a lot of practice with deathmatch to perfect that aim. So after you practice with it a little more, does it still feel a little too fast or a little too slow actually? Again, if it feels too slow, increase it again by another 2. So instead of having it at 0.62, you're going to want to increase it to 0.64. You want to keep practicing with that until you find a sensitivity that feels comfortable for you. Now, after that, if you feel that now when you flick at the enemy, if it's going too far from them, you decrease it by 0.02. So now, I want to get into the more complicated aspect of things, and why do I have the mouse acceleration of, when I go to my game options, my keyboard and mouse, and I look here, you'll notice that my mouse acceleration, I have Ryan put off, and I mentioned that you want to turn off Windows mouse acceleration. But for some reason, I decided to have mouse acceleration on in CSGO and have it at 1.05. The reason is, Windows mouse acceleration is significantly greater than anything you've ever imagined. The best mouse acceleration I find is that it's polling from the game, which is 1.05. So when I'm moving my mouse really quickly, it's not really affecting it that much. I'm moving it as quick as I possibly can across my mouse pad, and it's not making me do 360s as if I were using the raw mouse input, as if I were using Windows mouse acceleration. Sorry. But anyway, getting back into this, I'm going to be explaining why I have it at just Counter-Strike Go's mouse acceleration. So again, this works as a ratio, okay? It works as a ratio. It's something that I found allowed me to flick better. When I had it on and I had it at 1.05, there's a couple of things I want to mention. First off, I enjoyed that my mouse, when I move it very slow, it maintains really slow, but when I move it fast or flick my hand a bit, it can maintain it can move more than I need it to, because 1.8 is really a slow sensitivity. But keep in mind, it's not as bad as having Windows mouse itself. So I've been tweaking everything to it, and I've noticed that I like mouse itself. If you don't like it, don't try it. Don't use it. Just work with what you have of having it off. Do what I said about having that zoom sensitivity and practicing changing it and tweaking it to perfect it. Now, this is how you're going to really be able to flick and be able to snipe at enemies. First, it's all about the angle. You're going to want to get the longest angle possible, meaning do not peek up this close or this close or this close when you're peeking the tunnel. The reason is the enemy will always see you before you see them. And the best way to peek them is actually from the furthest angle possible, which is literally up to this wall, the furthest angle possible. I've noticed some people like to aim like this. The reason I don't do that is because, first of all, what if the enemy wanted to peek you on that angle directly there? Remember, you want to peek from the furthest angle possible. So assume I were to be over there, and me being a sniper, I peek from the furthest angle possible. So I would peek like that. Notice how I've cornered up the wall, the door, with the wall there. It makes me have a very sharp angle, and I can easily see everything out there and snipe them, and the enemy has less of me to shoot at. Now, being other players might want to be peeking like this, and this, in my opinion, is really bad. The enemy will be able to snipe you dead, and you're an easier target, essentially, for more people to shoot at. So keep in mind, you want to have your aim essentially something like that. Now, when the enemy comes out, and assuming there's two ways the enemy can peek. Number one is they'll peek right here, and number two is they'll run across, or number three, well, the third way is they can run out. Either way, it sums up to two ways, which is they'll peek right here, like the way I showed you, or they're going to run across, which is here. And essentially, what you want to do to be a good flick shooter, because now we've practiced adjusting your sensitivities, and we've set it down, is just flick to it. Just flick, 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 and that's it. It's really that simple. You want to practice just flicking at that. But the idea is, the key thing is, the angle that you're peeking at. You want to peek from the furthest angle possible. And if you'll notice, something that I do is I always pre-aim a corner. Notice how I scoped in prior to peeking. That's very crucial. So with that, you can be able to flick shoot. It all comes down from that. With a bunch of practice and a bunch of deathmatch, you can have some of the greatest shots you've ever taken just by playing deathmatch. So play a bunch of it, perfect your aim. And the reason I like deathmatch so much is because as you're sniping the enemy, you can have enemies behind you or to the side of you, so you can practice that flick shoot or perfecting your aim a lot better. Anyway guys, that sums it up. If you enjoyed this commentary, please leave a like down below and a favorite. Let me know what you guys thought of this commentary and if you want to see more, because I'm thinking of coming out on another commentary on how to perfect your crosshair and what